Good morning and welcome to Missoula Real Estate Today. This is Denny Bedard. Missoula Real Estate Today is presented by Diane Beck of Windermere Real Estate. Along with her trusted partners, Diane provides complete service for your real estate transaction. And now, Missoula Real Estate Today on News Talk, KGVO. And good morning. Thank you, as always, for joining us on Missoula Real Estate Today. From time to time, Diane Beck with Windermere Real Estate likes to donate her airtime to a community service organization, and that's what we do have going on this week on Missoula Real Estate Today here on News Talk KGVO. I'm joined by Todd Lengacher. Todd is the Executive Director of Big Brothers Big Sisters Northwest Montana. Well, we'll talk about how that ties into the Missoula area as well. Todd, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you, Denny. How are you?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for taking some time to talk to us here. And I always like to start with a little background, what your position is with Big Brothers Big Sisters Northwest Montana. I should say what the Executive Director does, what all that entails.
Yeah, so we're a pretty small organization. We have just 5 employees and then a board. So, you know, the different organizations, different nonprofits, and different executive directors have different responsibilities. At our size, I would say most executive directors are pretty directly involved in every aspect of the organization. So, you know, that's communication, financial side, fundraising, program, outreach. So that's one of the, you know, the things I think is attractive to me about this position is it keeps you very busy and keeps you busy in lots of different ways. Probably for me, the most important or the most attractive is it gets me out in the communities and getting to know other people in our community who are committed to making the places where we live the healthiest and the most vital we can.
And I think most people are aware by now, Big Brothers Big Sisters Missoula did close the Missoula office. Gosh, I want to say somewhere in the neighborhood of a year, if not more now. Todd, what was your reaction to that, and how did you make the decision to start expanding your services to include the Missoula area?
Yeah, so I have been in this position almost exactly as long as the Missoula office has been enclosed. So when I walked into this position, this conversation had just started to percolate at our board level. And then it also was a conversation between the various offices within Montana. So right now, at that time, there were 6 Big Brothers Big Sisters offices throughout the state. All of them in the western part of the. Actually, I guess that's not true. I guess in Yellowstone wouldn't be considered in the western, but most of them are on this side of the state.
Yeah.
So I think one thing is that there was a commitment within the Big Brothers Big Sisters Montana community to do something, to not just let all of that long and good work evaporate and go away. So several of the offices got more serious about it, and it kind of came down to us saying, well, one of us has to do something. And that was it was mostly a community health decision and partly, I guess, a business decision, but mostly it was driven by suspecting that there was a need in Missoula and to try and reestablish it there. So I really went into it wanting to answer 3 questions, 2 of which I didn't know the answer to, and one of which I was pretty sure I knew the answer to. And that one was, is there a need for this service amongst the youth in Missoula? And that one obviously the answer is yes. In almost every community, I would guess. I don't know of a community who would say, we don't think our community would benefit from an additional layer of adult support for our kids, right? That's kind of an obvious one.
Yeah.
And the other 2 were, is the community of Missoula, do they believe that this is the right time to reinitiate this service, and is that going to be value added for the community? And I would say, in my due diligence of having talked to probably a dozen business owners, supporters of Big Brothers Big Sisters, the Mayor Ingen, really trying to trying to cover all of the various constituencies, I was expecting lukewarm to yes with some caution because the office had just closed. And I was very pleasantly surprised that 100% of the people, of the businesses, of the organizations, other nonprofits that I talked to said absolutely, and we will do anything to support that effort. So that was really helpful to hear in those early innings of, is this something we want to do? And it was unequivocal. So that made it a lot easier. And then I think the hardest question for us was, since Missoula had just closed, of is there something specific about Missoula that is going to make it more challenging for us to offer services there than it would be in other places? So is there something specific to Missoula? And we found no evidence to suggest that there were going to be any additional challenges other than all of the challenges that come along with running a nonprofit in the human and health services.
Sure.
So we didn't find anything there. So that was nice to have so much support and not see any obvious obstacles that we were concerned about overcoming.
Missoula Real Estate Today is presented by Diane Beck of Windermere Real Estate, who likes to donate the airtime once in a while to a community service organization. Our guest this week, Todd Lengacher, Executive Director of Big Brothers Big Sisters Northwest Montana, and how they are getting involved with the Missoula market. To your point there about the things you were considering, Todd, I would assume there was a fairly it always seemed like when I would work or visit with Danette Rector, the former executive director here at the Missoula office prior to its closing, that there were always a lot of kids on that waiting list, waiting for matches. At the same time, there were quite a few Big Brothers, Big Sisters who were involved in the program. So I think that speaks to your point. Was there a need? What has the communication process been like with kids who were on the waiting list at the time and those who were Big Brothers and Big Sisters at the time?
Yeah, so I think it's fair to say that everybody in the community, including what we call our bigs, our mentors, and our littles, our kids and their families, were surprised by the timeline of that decision and the communication. So I think most people felt like it came pretty fast, the decision to close the Missoula office. So once we took the decision to expand our service area into Missoula, I hired there's a full-time employee that is in Missoula there now, and she actually was an employee in the Missoula office. So thankfully, there was someone there who was still really committed to the mission and wanted to continue their work. And so this person, Maria Newbold, has actually already been in contact with a bunch of those families and a bunch of the mentors. So our first job was to reach out and contact everybody who had just received the message that their matches, as we like to call them, were closed. So we went through and made hundreds of phone calls and hundreds of emails and communications saying, this thing happened. We know that you just closed, and this is going to seem a little bit like a roller coaster ride, but we're here. We want to support you if you're interested in continuing in this relationship. So that was probably 4 months across last summer of us just attempting to be in communication with everybody.
Yeah. And as you mentioned a few minutes ago, too, nonprofits, of course, the ever-present challenge of fundraising. What about fundraising projects for Missoula specifically? Has there been a conversation to resurrect the ones that were in place, or maybe some new ideas forthcoming?
Yeah, so your question is a timely one. So I have just been reaching out to some of the longtime supporters. I would put, and people who have been involved in those, like I would put you on that list, and you mentioned Danette Rector. And there's a lot of people who for many, many years were supporters and involved in, the golf tournament and bowling and all of those things. So I am in the process right now of convening an advisory group that could help us make some decisions about what fundraising efforts do we want to repeat from ones that were successful before? What might we want to change? What might we want to try differently? And of course, this is an unusual time to be talking about bringing a lot of people together at a fundraising event, right? We've got a lot of challenges associated with that. So the good news is that in the past, the community has responded well to those. The other really good news is that to date we've had not only people verbally commit their support to us, but they have backed that up with action, and some of that has been financial support. So the Missoula Community Foundation has been incredibly supportive of us. We were involved in the Missoula fundraising event, Missoula Gives, a couple months ago now, I guess.
Yeah.
And the Washington Foundation, Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, has been very supportive, as have some local businesses. So far, the response has been tremendous, both just, yes, we want you to be here, but also people backing that up with financial support.
Missoula Real Estate Today, presented by Diane Beck of Windermere Real Estate. Our guest, Todd Lengacher, Executive Director of Big Brothers Big Sisters, Northwest Montana, talking about presence in Missoula now. As far as recruiting, Todd, we do know that typically there's a lot of kids on the waiting list waiting for matches. Always tends to be a few more boys than girls waiting. That's just kind of how that works. But the recruiting process, I can remember for just years and years helping you folks with marketing, the misconception of, well, they want a big brother. That means they want a college age kid or somebody in their early to mid 20s who's single and has a lot of free time on their hand. Is that still a hurdle you're trying to overcome? Because I know that your program is open to a pretty broad demographic if folks meet the criteria.
Right. So we largely work independently, but we are associated with Big Brothers Big Sisters at the national level. So one of the benefits of that is that we have a lot of statistics from what works, what doesn't work. And you just hit on one of the enduring challenges of this particular service model is getting male mentors.
Yeah.
So that has been and probably will continue to be one of our biggest challenges.
Right.
So we do get families that bring us boys and want their boy to be matched with a male mentor. That's a very common request. And that is one of our biggest challenges, is keeping up with that demand. That said, we do successfully match boys with female adult mentors. So at this point, I would say, one of our biggest challenges in Missoula right now and the surrounding areas is just awareness. So when we just did some marketing and we're involved in Missoula Gives through the Missoula Community Foundation, we continue to get emails and phone calls saying, "Oh, wait, you guys are open again? What's going on?" So,
yeah.
The transition has been confusing, and just that we are offering services there. So right now, that's probably our biggest challenge, is just letting people know that it is happening. That said, Missoula Gives was great in terms of getting that message out. We've done some other marketing and some events there. So the really good news right now is that we continue to have inquiries from adults in Missoula. And in fact, I would say we may be to the point now where we have more adults than kids, which is
Wow.
a good problem to have. So we're always trying to keep up on both ends, and the pendulum swings. But right now, it's been an extraordinary response. We've been very purposeful in some ways. I have reached out to several of the newer and larger businesses in the area. Submittable is on that list, and ATG is on that list, knowing that they have lots of employees that meet some of those criteria that you just described of young professionals who are looking to be connected to their community in some way. So those have been good connections. And we're also working with the school districts. They're an obvious source of children, but their communication capacity is enormous. So we've recently had a lot of success in working with school districts and leveraging their capacity to communicate with large audiences that have yielded a lot of mentors for us.
Yeah. It seems like, too, Todd, there was always the discussion about, I hesitate to call it an objection, but if a potential mentor was being recruited and thinking about doing this, I know questions often arose about, well, what kind of a time commitment are you talking about, and how much out-of-pocket expense is this going to involve, right? I mean, you probably get that a lot.
Right. So, the out-of-pocket so I think one of the misconceptions, and you hit on it with the out-of-pocket expense, is that to be offering to this child what they want to get out of it, it needs to be attached to an experience. And often people come up with experiences that have significant costs associated with it, like going up to the ski mountain and paying for the lift ticket and all of that, or going to the movies. And all of those are fine activities. What we know absolutely from all of our conversations with the kids is, do they like going to the movies? Yes. What is meaningful to them is kindness and consistency, if I had to boil it down to two words. So what they appreciate about their mentors is that they show up every time that they say they're going to show up. They listen carefully. They're kind. They play a game. So for them, going to the park and going for a walk and having a conversation is, in the end, as powerful, if not more, than going and doing an expensive thing. So I think there is a misconception about this is going to cost me a lot of money or a significant amount of money as a mentor. Yeah,
that's interesting, isn't it? That something like that you just described is something that, fortunately, so many kids are able to take for granted in their lives, but not these kids all the time.
Absolutely, yes. And so what they crave is just another adult who cares about them and follows through and says and does what they say they're going to do. So they, there's so many benefits with that, right? Of they get another adult's perspective, they get a chance to debrief what's going on in their lives, but it also builds trust in adults, and I think then that builds trust in the community around them, which I think is incredibly powerful.
Right. Missoula Real Estate Today, presented by Diane Beck of Windermere Real Estate, and Diane donating her airtime this week to a community service awareness, in this case, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Missoula. Yes, there is a presence again. And our guest, Todd Lengacher, Executive Director of Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Northwest Montana. So spends a lot of time servicing Kalispell, the Flathead area, and now into Missoula as well. Todd, do you see a lot of, I think you said you've been on the job about a year. Do you see a lot of differences and similarities between the programs in Northwest Montana and then the program here in Missoula?
Yeah, so when you break it down to the basic elements, there is no difference, right? There's adults who are looking to contribute and make their to give back in their community and be contributing members of their community to the health and well-being of the places in which they live. And then there's families who, for whatever reason, feel like their child would benefit from another adult in their life. So those transcend location, I think, anywhere in Montana and probably anywhere in the world. There certainly are differences between as you said, we actually, right now we actually have our area of responsibility is the northwestern 9 counties of Montana, which is overwhelming to think about. But we're really, as you said, we're primarily servicing Kalispell and Missoula, although we are expanding within Flathead County and servicing people as far north as Columbia Falls and as far south as Big Fork. So we are more than just Kalispell and Missoula, but your point is still relevant. So one of the things that I've been doing is trying to enlist advisory groups, building an advisory group in Missoula. We have a board that we're expanding so that we make sure we have Missoula board members, Flathead County board members, to get at some of the subtle differences in the communities. And they are different places. Even within Flathead County, which is enormous, there's a big difference between Columbia Falls and Whitefish, which are right next to each other, right, in terms of who lives there their capacity to be involved and what the needs of the kids are. So, and then I think Missoula, unlike Kalispell, has a university, obviously, and that's we are now connected with the education department there, and that's a whole resource that isn't available to us in Flathead, although there is the community college. And then there's just a different community of businesses, and as you know, there's some startups that are having great success there, and that whole sector is growing in a way that I think is different here. So that's attracting all these young professionals in a way that, I think what we see more here, especially at the north end of Flathead County, is people buying their second home, people coming here to retire. So it is interesting to think about those differences, and we are trying to be strategic about how we communicate with all of our constituencies, whether that's fund donors or families or mentors.
You mentioned, too, that right now, as far as Missoula goes, you have a pretty good pool of mentors waiting for kids. A lot of times it's the other way around with Big Brothers, Big Sisters. Do you see that kind of balancing out, Todd, as the more awareness that you create that, hey, Big Brothers, Big Sisters is back in Missoula? My guess is that the more that gets promoted and marketed, and I'm not trying to sell you an ad package here, Todd, by the way, but the more that gets promoted, maybe I am. The more that gets promoted and marketed, I would think that you would have, more single parents or whatever the case may be, contacting the Missoula office saying, I would like my child to be on the list.
Yeah, and we expect that to go back up. The impact of schools closing, the impact of the pandemic, where most people are turning inward and just hunkering down for the time, I think has impacted. And they're at home. There's more people at home, literally in the home right now for the kids. So I think that's why right now we're seeing the pendulum swinging back toward. It's also a time that adults that have the capacity are looking for a way to help in their community. So I guess I'm not surprised that the pendulum has swung right now more toward we have adults contacting saying, how can we be of service? And then families are hunkered down at home. I think once the schools reopen, once people have a better sense of the future and feeling more stability, then we'll see them start reaching out to us. But, we are actively working with the schools in Missoula. So what they will say is, yes, of course, we have an infinitely long list of students that we think would benefit from this. So, there will be no shortage of youth, that's for sure.
Yeah, excellent. Good answer. Missoula Real Estate Today, presented by Diane Beck from Windermere Real Estate. Diane donating her airtime to community service awareness this week. Todd Lengacher, Executive Director of Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Northwest Montana, now working and getting involved in Missoula as well. How about success stories, Todd? I always like to ask my guests about anything the organization has done recently that you found extremely rewarding or gave you extra satisfaction.
Yeah, I think I would point to a couple of things. I am really impressed just with my staff and my board in terms of how we have dug in and modified our policies and practices and procedures to keep what we know is a really vital connection alive during a time when the smart thing to do is not be out doing face-to-face activities in your community, right? So being smart about taking appropriate health measures. So we have had to modify how our mentors are staying connected to the kids because we know that perhaps more than ever, this is a time when kids need stability and consistency as their whole world has been turned upside down and they've been told, they're not going to school and so many other changes. So I think it's been a huge success for us that we have managed to find meaningful ways for those relationships to continue under duress. And then it has, the pandemic has caused us to be in relationship with both our mentors and our families in different ways out of necessity. And the success there is that we, once, if we ever do return to normal, we will not discard all of those things that we've learned and implemented. So specific examples are we collaborated with some foundations. We collaborated with Imagination Station, some bookstores, and we put together some education learning packages for our littles, since many of them were now stuck at home, not in school, and didn't necessarily have the resources to continue learning, both, just in terms of the basics of, we delivered paper and pencils and scissors and glue. Those were really well received. I think anything kind of bright moment in the day of a family stuck at home, but it also put us into contact with new partnerships within our communities, which, again, will endure into the future. So lots of little acts that have connected us in new and more meaningful and probably deeper ways with our families, with our mentors, and with partner organizations.
You mentioned, too, I know you come to Missoula when you can, but you do have a presence in Missoula. I mean, in presence in terms of a staff member and a location. Can we say where the location is in Missoula now?
So because it started off, we're starting off small and quickly we jumped in there. At this point, our staff member is working out of a home office, and then, of course, with the pandemic, that was what everybody was doing. So we haven't shifted that model. My hope is that we will grow into having a need for an office space, but at this point, our staff member is just working out of a home office.
Is there any possibility that I might once again start bowling 2 games a year? Again, going back to the national organization, the Bowl for Kids' Sake is the premier fundraiser within the national organization. So it is, to the extent that some of the really large offices, it's their unique form of fundraising. They run, a dozen of these a year. So it is a model that does seem to work. The public likes it. It's a good fundraising model. So it's an obvious one. Obviously there's some challenges right now around bringing together 300 people in a bowling alley at the same time. But I hope, this is the kind of information we're hoping to solicit from Missoula of, what has worked in the past and what would people that know that community well advise. So, yes, I'm hoping we see you out there bowling some strikes. Yeah, me too. I can tell you that, first off, you got a wonderful partner here in Westside Lanes. I know Robin, the general manager over there, and she was just able to reopen Westside Lanes. Not limited, of course, but Westside Lanes reopened a couple of weeks ago. But, man, they just they make you feel so welcome and do an awesome job. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Our guest this week on Missoula Real Estate Today has been Todd Lengacher, Executive Director for Big Brothers Big Sisters, Northwest Montana. Now with a presence in Missoula once again, which is great news. Todd, as we wrap it up here, how about contact information if anyone would like to know more about Big Brothers Big Sisters being back in Missoula and all of that right now? Yeah, so probably the easiest thing for most people is just to jump on the internet and do a Google search for Big Brothers Big Sisters, Montana, Missoula, and you'll see our website pop up. Our direct phone line is 752-0092, and that comes right into our office here. But thankfully, with the internet, it's easy to find us. Good job. Todd Lengacher, Executive Director of Big Brothers Big Sisters, Northwest Montana, on Missoula Real Estate Today, presented by Diane Beck of Windermere Real Estate. Really appreciate it, Todd. Thanks so much. Oh, Denny, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much, and we'll get you out on that lane for all the strikes here soon. All right, you got a deal. Okay, bye. Thank you for listening to Missoula Real Estate Today. Contact Diane Beck with Windermere Real Estate. Email dianebeck@realtor.com or visit her website, homesinmissoula.com. We'll see you next time on Missoula Real Estate Today.